Been reading a lot of comments. I'm overwhelmed. I spend the first hour or two of my morning reading comments, planning for what I'm going to do on this thing throughout the rest of the day. A few of you have asked, who am I? How do we get here? Where I'm going? Right now I'd like to touch on how did we get here? In earlier videos I've explained, my father inspired me by telling me about the B-36s flying over. But where do we start? Where did this really materialize into physical form? Probably started around 1998 when I purchased my first firearm. That interest in firearms that stemmed from being an 80s kid, growing up watching G.I. Joe, Predator, Commando, stuff like that, Rambo. I was really big in the military guns. My interest in firearms focused quickly on historical firearms, World War II, World War I, the Victorian era. Quickly I realized that my interest in aviation and firearms could come together when I realized that some of the guns that I was starting to accumulate could have fired upon the Red Baron, or Manfred von Richthofen, someone that I've always been fascinated with all of my life. So I started accumulating more and more and more guns. A lot of guns. I just like them for their historical aspect, interest, and they're beautiful machines. That's about it. I rarely shoot my guns. I have maybe shot my guns once with my son, who's now in the Army, in the past 10 years. I started building guns. I started buying demilitarized parts kits of belt-fed guns such as the MG42, the 1919 A4, the Bren gun, and a few others. And I converted them from full automatic to semi-automatic. I'm not going to get into that process, but when you take something that is something and you change it into another thing, by default it becomes another thing. National Firearms Talk. It's a whole different series. Guns got too expensive. I was going around buying guns out of barrels that nobody wanted around here because they weren't hunting rifles. Couldn't go shoot a deer with a gun like it. So I get a gun that's worth today $600-800. I get it for $50, and I did it every weekend for 5 years. That's all I did. Every weekend I would wake up and I would hit all of the gun stores in a 60-mile radius, religiously. As that tapered off because of expenses, I found a new interest. Inert ordnance. Artillery shells with no explosives in them, empty hand grenades, things of that nature. Basically, big pieces of metal that nobody wanted at the time. I saw these things selling on eBay for you name it. And I'd find them at flea markets, garage sales, wherever. And I got them for pennies on the dollar. And I started doing that in 2007, and I did that for 10 years. That's pretty much all I did. I've always been somebody and if I see something, unless I perceive it to be a investment, a lucrative investment, it doesn't hold my attention. I'm not a big spender in that sense. I'm a minimalist in the sense of like my clothing, my vehicle, pretty much everything I've bought since I graduated from high school was an investment. I did a lot of restoring of the guns, cleaning them up. That's how I learned how to work with a milling machine, a lathe, and then I carried that on to the ordnance. Spinning artillery shells in my lathe, cleaning them up, making rotating bands, making reproduction fuses, making tail fins for casings, Yada, yada, yada. Well, the rest of the world caught on like they did with guns. Prices skyrocketed. It just got to the point where when I would find this stuff on the weekends, it would be just too expensive. Fast forward to around 2016, my wife said, "You need to make more money. You need to give me some more money." So I said, okay. So I started putting things on eBay. eBay quickly became a full-time thing in 2016. In 2017, I was laid off from my longest career, which I worked in a warehouse and drove small trucks. I delivered to factories and whatnot. I was quite successful on eBay when I got laid off. I was very excited about being laid off. So the whole eBay thing, I am a picker. I'm the kind of guy that drives around and looks for properties to explore. I've been in so many barns, attics, burnt, abandoned places. I've seen a lot of things that I wish I could forget. I have taken on a much more broad perspective of how other people live. I have seen, I was really good at it, and I still am. I've got a knowledge base that is just, I can look at an item and I can tell you why it's valuable based on its historical aspects. And I was doing really well at it. Then the pandemic happened. In 2020, a lot of antique dealers such as myself were born. A lot. Combine that with the ability to take a picture of something and Google will immediately tell you how much it's worth, what it is, and what they sell for on a regular basis. Everybody that was myself previous to that time period was now me. Unless I was at a location that did not have a cell phone reception, I was pretty much outgunned by somebody who started yesterday, and comparing my knowledge base of 20 years studying history in regards to the firearms, the ordnance, war, military predominantly. I'm also really interested in physics and chemistry. I like to understand how things work. In 2020, like I said, things changed. I used to wake up in the morning and get in my car, spin a bottle on a mat, off I went. I'd come home with so much resellable items that it was almost comical. It was taking candy from a baby. Now, I do eBay, and I have an antique mall that I rent a considerable amount of spaces from. I was doing really well with that in 2020, later part of 20 into 21, but now it's getting to the point where, because of the cost of fuel, I'm tired of going 20 places, driving 400 miles a day and not finding anything. And I'm getting old. I'm 46 years old, and I drove trucks. I drove tractor trailers. I've been in every state in the union. I've done a lot of time in New York City. I've been in a lot of bad places, but now, at my age, this ain't no country for old men. I get intimidated by driving up to Columbus to an antique show. I just don't want to be away from my family anymore. So where did the B-36 come from with that taken into consideration? In 2021, when I was, kind of still floating around riding the eBay wave, my wife brought home a relative that was blind and had dementia. We became his caretaker, my wife predominantly. I did everything I could, ran the background, took care of the kids, provided transportation. It was dark. Really, it was frustrating. It was dark. For 7 months, we couldn't leave the house. We could not leave the man's side. He could not leave our side. In order to be a successful antique dealer and eBay reseller, you have to travel. I did not like the idea of going out into the world and leaving my wife stuck in the living room with her father figure. So I stayed home. I began to sell off my vast hordes of eBay items that I'd stockpiled. And that's about the time that the B-36 came along. I've said in earlier videos that I collected instruments on eBay for about 20 years. It took me to accumulate the main panel. I went to the Strategic Air and Space Museum in Omaha, Nebraska, and went on aircraft 522217. And I immediately ran up to the flight deck and took the measurements of the main panel. I've been waiting to do that a long time because I'd always wanted to build the main panel to hang on the wall. It's 57 inches by 14 inches. Ran home and immediately took a decommissioned road sign, cut out the main panel, popped the gauges in there, and I said that was great. Then came the console, and then came the dementia patient. For 6 months, instead of going out and driving around, I focused on that console. It was kind of like a dream state. That's all I did. He eventually died, and that's when I moved on to the sides, kind of getting back into the eBay, getting out more into the world, re-establishing myself. But performance declined. That's when I was, working on the jets. I started on the canopy. I was out in my shop working on the main panel. I was working on the pilot's data computer. There are little plexiglass spaces I needed to make an inch worth. My phone rang. It was my mom. My mom never called me for help. She's a pretty much a go-getter at her age. But she needed help. She wanted me to drive, 25 miles to see her so I could get her some water out of the garage. Took her a little while to tell me, but she fell and broke her back. If y'all know anything about getting old, you know that when people start falling, or once they fall, they start falling more. So my wife and I pretty much flipped the switch, and we started the process of moving my business inventory, my B-36 collection, the B-36, to my mother's house where I am now to be her full-time caretaker. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm building the B-36 pretty much full-time. My mom is, right around the corner, so I can keep a close eye on her. If she needs my help, I help her. We're here for her. That's what you do when you're 46 years old. I've been selling off my aforementioned collectibles and building the B-36. So that's how we got here. For those of you who are really interested into the finer details of this construction process, you can visit on Facebook, search for the B-36 interest group. Literally thousands and thousands of photographs of this build from the first road sign that I cut to make the main panel. It's extremely detailed, explained, until I kind of started doing the video thing because I got tired of typing. That's my one excuse. I'm sticking to it. So now you know who I am. Yada, yada, yada. Thanks for your support. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for taking me seriously. Thanks for watching. And where's the B-36 going? You're seeing sitting right here. It's all based on my performance on YouTube because I'm hoping to make YouTube my primary income. And I'm hoping to make a career out of my talent, my ability to fabricate. I want to build airplanes. I want to build the 36H. I want to build the XB-36 next, followed by the XB-19, the XB-15, and either a B-32 or the XB-32. I figure I got a good 15 to 20 years left in me. The better my YouTube performs, I get monetized, I have money, I don't have to worry about the eBay and the selling of the collectibles, and I can focus on this. That's what's going to happen, and I hope it does. See you next time.